Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Iron Fanfics, back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Posses Golem Quirk. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Izuku Midoriya was dumbfounded and in shock. He was dead, he had died. And he didn't even need to take Kaken's oh-so-helpful advice. He thought sarcastically. No, he died due to a combination of a villain shoving himself down his throat and what he was pretty sure was All Might's Detroit smash. He hadn't paid much attention to what was happening when he came to, in the dark room world. He was in shock. He barely paid any attention to the goddess Aqua, and he barely paid any attention to the other guy who appeared at the same time as he did. Then the so-called goddess was throwing around backhanded insults at them. Insulting one for being a shut-in and the other for being a weak-butted reject, or how pathetic of a way they had died and how some people celebrated their deaths, or laughed at how they died, then gave them three choices. Choice 1 allowed them to be reincarnated in their worlds. Choice 2 involved moving on into the boring afterlife. And choice 3 would let them be sent into another world where they would have to defeat the evil Devil King. A lot of others chose option 3. After she let them glance at a pamphlet of information on the other world and what to expect, but hadn't let them read it all the way through, she threw a stack of papers at them, telling them to pick either a skill or a weapon. And now after a good half hour, he had just watched the older teen and the goddess Aqua get teleported to the parallel world, all because she was rushing them to pick something, and that it didn't matter what they picked, that they'd still be losers. Honestly, one couldn't blame him for being shocked. The two had forgot that he was sitting off to the side as the two bickered with one another, and to be truthful he couldn't blame the other boy. Kazuma sad for getting revenge on the goddess. She shouldn't have been rude and so mad pushy, because in all seriousness the goddess was rude, self-centered and in his opinion an all-around stuck-up beach. And now the poor fool, admittedly one who got his revenge on her, was stuck with her. I wonder if that would be considered divine retribution? He wondered aloud. I'm not sure that's how that works. A musical voice said, "Have you finished looking through your options on your chosen skill or weapon?" That's right, Izuku had forgotten she was there, and he still hadn't picked anything. Izuku looked up at her from his spot on the floor, gently setting the stack of papers down. His mind was all over the place from the spectacle he had just witnessed, and really, it didn't matter what he chose. After all, he was essentially being cheated. Again, that Kazuma guy got a whole freaking goddess. Nothing in the stack of papers came even close to being on par with a goddess. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that Aqua alone was at least worth everything within the stack of weapons and skills options. And now that he thought back on what Aqua said, she had explicitly said they could pick whatever they wanted. Izuku had an idea, but he needed a little more information before he could act on it. He was determined to make an informed decision, not just rush into something because he was told to. He began as he looked up to the angel. Wouldn't it be possible to take a look at that pamphlet before I make any decision? He stuttered nervously, feeling the weight of his decision and the uncertainty of his situation. The angel blinked owlishly before smiling. Of course. She then handed him the pamphlet that Aqua had barely let him and the other teen glance at. Izuku took his time reading over every page. He was amazed at some of the information, from the general idea of how money worked to the class system and even a vague idea of what kind of monsters and foes he could and probably would encounter. But what interested him was that he could level up and gain skill points to gain skills. He also became interested in the stats, info he read about, and vaguely wondered at what his stats would look like. With my luck, my stats are probably terrible. Izuku thought, his self-doubt creeping in as he considered the potential challenges ahead. He already knew from looking at a few examples of the classes available that the warrior class was a no-go. He knew instinctively that one would have to have high stats and strength. The same could be said for the thief class. He wasn't lucky. If he were lucky, he would have been born with a quirk. The weight of his choices and his vulnerability in this new world were becoming increasingly apparent. Knowing his luck, he'd be stuck with the adventure class. If not, he may just be lucky and end up with the wizard class. Compared to most in the world he was about to go to, he did have a higher education, despite all the attempts by his former teachers to sabotage him. He had taken a few online courses in a few areas. He was already doing high school courses in English, math, and science. And thanks to Bakugo and his goons, Izuku was knowledgeable in first aid and medicine. So, mayhaps with that last bit he could be in the priest class. Finally, he placed the pamphlet down. He knew what he would say. For too long he had allowed people to belittle him, bully him, and just downright abuse him. The only person who didn't was his mom, and just thinking about how alone she was going to be made his eyes water with unshed tears. But no more, he wouldn't allow it anymore. With this revelation of gods, goddesses, and angels, he was said. These so-called divine beings denied him a quirk, ruined his life, turned him into a punching bag for others to test their quirks on, and put so much stress on his mother. A cold calmness settled within Izuku. As much as he wanted to, he couldn't blame every god and goddess, but oh, how he wanted to. Looking back up at the angel, began to speak. Well, my lady, I have looked over everything and sadly, nothing here really calls out to me. And well, can I be honest with you? He asked hesitantly, receiving a nod from the angel. I feel like I'm being cheated. He stated blandly, earning a confused arched brow from the angel who sat in the chair Aqua had previously been sitting in. Can you explain? She asked quizzically. Well, Izuku began, all my life, it has been one big struggle after the next. It started okay, but everything went wrong when my quirk never came in. First, my mom wouldn't stop crying, then I lost all my friends. People started treating me like there was something wrong with me, and then people started bullying me or discriminating against me. And well, I'm tired of being denied my dreams. Yes, I want to be a hero. I want to save people with a smile and let them know everything will be okay because I'm there to help. But I feel like I'm being cheated. That guy, Kazuma Sada, just got a freaking goddess as his cheat. How is that fair? I mean, there is nothing within this stack of options that comes remotely close to that. He ranted, irritated at the situation. The angel looked contemplative for a moment before she began to speak. While that may be true, she is indeed a goddess, but Aqua will not have full access to her divine powers. She explained. Izuku nodded, fully understanding the situation, but still, which is expected, but even then she is still incredibly powerful, and no matter how you look at it, at the end of the day she is still a goddess, and from what little I could read from that pamphlet she will be able to regain a large portion of her power as she levels up and gains EXP, and I have no doubt that her stats are going to be incredibly high, so I would have to say she is at least worth 12 of these options, and that's if we take into consideration that her powers have been effectively cut in half. It seems to be only fair that I should get things of my choosing to balance it out fairly and make up for the power imbalance. He internally winced at his wording. He usually was more eloquent than that, but surely he could be forgiven. He did just die after all. The angel looked thoughtful for a moment, seeming to be having a silent conversation with herself. But then again, for all he knew, she was conversing with someone else. He watched as she seemed to nod to herself. Very well, you will be allowed to choose 7 cheats for yourself. They can be anything you want or desire, but need to be within reason, she declared in a firm but still light tone. Thank you, milady. He gave a low bow before reaching over to his backpack, which had strangely come with him. He pulled out one of his many notebooks, not his hero analysis, but an extra one he had for school work and note-taking. He also pulled out a pen before writing down what he wanted. He tapped his chin in thought. What exactly did he want? He thought about it for a moment longer before a thought entered his mind. Obviously, I'm going to need money. What was it called again? Theris. That's it. The teen muttered to himself, quickly writing down a reasonable amount. Or, well, what he thought was a reasonable amount. Next, he began by thinking of a valuable skill that would help him in the long run and could earn him money. Potions are useful, and if I have a skill like alchemy or potion crafting, I could easily sell my products to earn an income. He added a skill for alchemy, and then a book for potion crafting and recipes. He was sure he could probably buy a book at some point, but he felt that books in the other world would be expensive, and he wanted to begin as soon as possible. Next, since he figured he could potentially gain the wizard class, he added what he called the arcane wizard staff, along with a detailed description and a hastily drawn picture of what it should look like. Ultimately, he had what looked to be a black version of Gandalf the White's wizard staff with a green gem hidden behind the elegant top knot. The staff had a few interesting perks that would boost his magical power and attack power slightly, and gave him a few spells he could learn, and finally, it had a return to owner feature. He didn't want it stolen. After the staff, he wanted something that could help him blend in, at least until he got some new clothes. The picture he drew was an emerald green version of a hooded trench coat from a pre-Quirk video game he had played. Of course, it had a silver lining around the edges to give it a little flair, and like the staff it had a few perks, like a second boost to his MP, a small boost to his health, and a slight increase to his defense. He was not planning on taking any chances. He had no idea what he could end up against in the other world, and he had no plans on dying a second time. When he reached his sixth cheat, he paused and pondered what he wanted. He wasn't sure what else to add when he remembered something vital, something all gamers and nerds knew. Wizards are not close combat specialists, his thoughts provided. I need something that can get up close and personal with monsters and enemies. His thoughts supplied for him. But what can I use? I'd rather not join someone's party unless I absolutely have to. But wait, what if? A grin spread across his face as he quickly began sketching another picture. He ensured the description was as detailed as possible, leaving nothing out. Looking down, his grin brightened. It was his best idea and probably his strongest cheat yet. No one would know how to handle a customizable golem. The picture showed a figure about 7 feet tall, and alone, it wasn't much to look at, what with its lanky form, broad chest and shoulders, and long limbs, but if you gave it armor and weapons of different qualities, it would fuse with the items. Izuku was already picturing it in enchanted gear and was giggling madly. Finally, Izuku came to his last cheat, and honestly he wanted a friend, specifically a dragon. If he was going to get his cheats, he planned to go all out on them, and frankly, who wouldn't want a dragon? The question was what kind of dragon he wanted? There were all sorts of dragons he could think of, but something too large seemed overkill, probably scare people and cause them to attack him and it. But something smaller would be manageable. He pulled out his cell phone and paused. Would it even work? Excuse me, but can I look something up on my phone? He asked, glancing up at the angel. Of course, if you think it'll help, then go ahead. She replied. Izuku immediately pulled up a search engine and searched for small dragons. The list was short. There was a dragon called Mushu from an old Disney movie, Spyro from an extensive collection of games, a dragon named Toothless, and several others. However, one caught his attention. The dragon's name was Archibald or Archie. The character was from an old Netflix show. What Izuku found interesting was that not only could he talk and breathe fire, but he could also change his form. From what Izuku read, Archie was a familiar, and unlike the other dragons, he was covered in black fur, resembled a cat, and wore glasses. Reading over the information regarding Archie, Izuku knew this was the dragon he wanted. Taking his pen, he wrote down everything he could about Archie. He'd even show the angel a picture of Archie to ensure she got his looks right. At last he was done. Setting his pen back into his backpack for safekeeping, not that he really needed it, he had 6 other packs of pens. He gently ripped the pages free from his notebook and handed the stack to the waiting angel, who took them and his phone with the picture of Archie. Thank you. All right, so let's see, The angel began as she read over his choices. A wizard staff, or as you call it, an arcane wizard staff. The design suits you, and the extra abilities are fairly simple. Your selected skill is an interesting choice. Alchemy herbalism, that'll be incredibly useful. Not many value the uses of potions nor care to learn to make them themselves. The cloak is also doable. Trying to blend in with the populace, that's smart as well. 5,000 Eris, also doable. Would have had to limit you had you gone over any more than that. Now, this golem is incredibly detailed. I like that you can customize it. Its unique abilities are interesting and doable. And last but not least, dragon familiar. Oh wow, I can see why you picked this dragon. He'd be instrumental in different situations. Not to mention he's so cuddly looking. The paper disappeared. His body glowed, and his new cloak appeared on his body. In contrast, his staff popped into existence, which he grabbed, and next to him, his new metallic customizable golem phased into reality. And there we go, so please step into the circle and don't forget your backpack. She smiled as he stepped into the same glowing circle the other teen had disappeared into. The same one Aqua had tried to get out of, sliding his backpack over his shoulder, taking note that it seemed heavier. And please stay safe, Izuku Midoriya, live your life, and should you manage to defeat the Devil King, any wish you desire shall be granted. Hopefully one day we shall meet again, but only after you have fulfilled your dreams, and remember, enjoy this second chance. Don't rush, and live. Before he disappeared, he gave a quick bow with a large smile. Thank you, Lady Angel, I will. And with that, he disappeared to the other world. When Izuku regained his ability to see, the first thing that filled his vision was the sight of a classic rural town. Horses, oxen, and donkeys were pulling carts with different items in the streets. People with relatively simple clothing walked at the side of the road, and the houses didn't strike him as being made with modern techniques, but at least they looked nice. Izuku took a deep breath. The air was so fresh, it held none of the smell of motor oil, gas, or exhaust fumes, but instead his nostrils caught the scent of dirt, grass. He could smell fresh baked bread that made his mouth water, and then he caught the smell of animal waste, and the beautiful image he was building up in his head shattered. Guess I'll need to go outside town for more fresh air. Izuku grimaced slightly. No way, came an excited exclamation. Oh, you have got to be joking. Izuku thought as his spine stiffened. Looking over to one side stiffly, Izuku took note of the other teen, who looked like an excited little kid who had just been told that Christmas had come early. And a former goddess, whose face was shrouded in darkness, and was trembling slightly. I guess time flows differently in that place than here, Izuku thought with intrigue, unless the angel put me here at the same time they got here. I can't believe it, I'm really in another world. Kazuma, that was his name, if Izuku remembered correctly. His excitement was becoming contagious. Izuku had to admit it was pretty amazing, like something out of those RPG games he played. The sheer wonder of this new world was enough to captivate anyone's imagination. I can't believe it. Kazuma breathed out. Izuku wasn't sure if the other guy realized he was there, but he didn't want to find out. So does that mean I get to learn magic and go on quests and stuff? The brunette questioned. I would expect so, Izuku muttered as he began to slowly inch away from the duo, because if Izuku was being honest, he wanted nothing to do with the rude, mean goddess, and by extension, that meant the older teen. We get to be heroes? Kazuma shouted in glee, throwing an arm over Izuku's shoulder. It looked like the other teen noticed him, after all. Whimper. Both teens turned to look at the slouched-over blue-haired goddess. I honestly forgot about her for a moment. Is she going to be okay? No sooner had Kazuma's words come out of her mouth than the dam seemed to open, and the girl's crying began to get louder and more hysterical as she began to tug on her hair desperately. What are you doing? Would you stop already? People are starting to stare, and you're ruining my moment. The teen let go of Izuku, who quickly moved away from the other two and stood a fair distance away, to watch the spectacle about to happen. Sata-sen, Izuku tried to warn, although the distressed goddess slightly drowned out his voice. So anyway, now that we're here, aren't you supposed to give me something? The teen asked, pointing to his apparel. I mean, look at me. I'm still in a tracksuit. I can't do what I gotta do in a fantasy world, wearing clothes like these. Don't I get some basic gear to start with? Kazuma continued, only to be grabbed by the brunette goddess who began to shake him for all he was worth, all the while wailing like a baby, with big ugly tears pouring from her eyes. Whoa, 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 the brunette cried out. At this point, Izuku desperately wanted to hide as people had begun to stop and stare at the two. Deciding it would be better if he just left, this was not his problem. He quickly turned around and came face to chest with a body made of metal. Looking up, he met a somewhat human-shaped face with glowing blue eyes trained on Izuku. He nearly jumped out of his skin. He had forgotten all about his golem. Making a motion to be quiet and to follow him, he and his metallic companion began to make their way deeper into the town. Surely it had a guild hall or something similar. Izuku looked around, looking for something to distract himself with before looking for the guild. He thought back to the pamphlet he had read while with the angel. He reached for his bag, and no sooner than he did it begin to wiggle about, nearly dropping it in. His shock, he hastily unzipped it. A set of yellow cat eyes peered up at him, round spectacles upon its face. The feline blinked before opening its mouth. "Well, it's about time you let me out." Izuku felt his jaw drop. He had forgotten he now had a familiar. The unexpected sight of a talking cat was enough to shock anyone. The familiar climbed out of the backpack, jumped to the ground, and stretched his body out. Much better. You have no idea just how uncomfortable it was in there. Your school supplies were practically crushing me alongside that potions guide. 6 different pens and pencils were trying to turn me into a pin cushion. The feline complained, turning its focus onto Izuku, who was still dumbfounded at the talking cat. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue?" Meow. Archie's witty and sarcastic personality was enough to entertain anyone. Izuku shook himself off his shock before replying, "Oh, sorry about that. What do I call you?" The cat straightened up with a sigh. "You may call me Archie. If it worked for the fictional version of me, it'll work for the real me." "Oh, okay, Archie, sorry about not realizing you were in my backpack sooner." Izuku apologized, rubbing the back of his neck. Archie nodded, apology accepted. "It's not like you were told I would be in there." Archie then took a moment to look around, making sure to look at the golem standing behind the teen up and down with a critical eye. "So this is Axel, located in the kingdom of Belzerg? Fascinating." Izuku blinked. "Wait? You know where we're at?" Kit, surprised. Archie nodded once. "Yes, the angel made sure to download all relevant information into my brain. As it stands, my intelligence stat is probably higher than yours at this point, and that's not me bragging, just stating an obvious fact." Izuku felt his fingers itching for a pen and one of his notebooks. He was eager to write down all of the new information. Speaking of notebooks, he grabbed one from the still-open backpack and pulled out a pen. He felt a weight land on his shoulder. Looking over, he found Archie making himself comfortable. "So what are we doing?" the dragon in disguise asked. Izuku looked back at his notebook. "I'm going to write down some goals and important information." Archie gave a nod of acknowledgement. Smart. He started writing out the few things he could remember from the pamphlet. Thanks to the angel, he had managed to memorize goals for himself. 1. The first town is called Axel, the town of beginners, and it is supposedly the friendliest town to start in. 2. Warning, I'm not meant to tell the inhabitants I come from another world. If asked about my origins, say I'm from a distant country and change the subject. Will something bad happen if I do tell them? Is this to prevent the people from this world thinking I'm crazy, or so they don't think I'm some kind of deity? 3. Once in Axel, I can do whatever I want. I can either find the Adventurers Guild and pay the admission fee, choose a class, and work my way up to being able to defeat the Devil King. Or I could find some other applicable trade. Thank you, alchemy herbalist skill. Sounds easy enough if I go by gaming logic, but as this is not a game, it could take months to even years before I am strong enough to face the Devil King. Or just take the easy life and follow the age-old rule of ignorance is bliss. For the language of the locals has been downloaded into my brain. If I were talking, reading, writing, and speaking Japanese, everything would now be in this other world's language. It sounds reasonable, simple, and concise so that I could ask for directions. Also, as a side note, if I don't want people reading my notebooks, write them in Japanese. I should also write everything in Japanese anyway. I don't want people reading my things. Once, if I join the guild, I should find a shop or find out if I can buy supplies from the guild. I will need new clothes and equipment. I should consider renting a room. I'll look into getting supplies tomorrow, except the room part, which can be done today. Then, I will do at least one simple and easy quest to get an idea of how it's done. 6. Avoid the former goddess Aqua. Don't feel like we will get along. He was sure he would add to that list later on as he remembered stuff from the pamphlet, but that would be enough for now. Stuffing the notebook back into his bag, he glanced around for the Adventurers Guild. He spotted a man walking past and ran over to him, before bowing. "Excuse me, sir. I was wondering if you knew where the Adventurer Guild was." The man looked him up and down. "Looking to join the Adventurers Guild, are you, lad?" the man asked, getting a nod from Izuku. Well, if you're sure, just follow the road until you get to the main square. Once you get to the large fountain, take a left. You can't miss it, it's the big building with the tower behind it. The man directed Izuku. As he walked off, he looked over his shoulder and yelled back at Izuku. Good luck, kid, you're gonna need it. Izuku was surprised upon seeing the guild building. It was huge. The other buildings weren't small, but this could almost pass as a mini castle. It even had a moat. Staring at the large wooden doors for a moment longer, Izuku felt a tap on his head from Archie and finally forced himself to move. He pushed on the door and was hit by a wave of heat and sound. Laughter, music, clicking cutlery on plates, and people smashing wooden mugs together overwhelmed him for a second. Charming, Archie muttered sarcastically. Oh, welcome, a girl, whom Izuku assumed was a waitress because she was carrying drinks, said as they entered. If you want to eat, grab a seat where you can. And if you are looking for work, head over to the counter. Izuku smiled and nodded, bowing to her slightly, getting a confused look from the waitress in return. Sue him, he was still following Japanese customs. He was being polite and respectful. Izuku just stood there and took a moment to look around the guild hall. There were decorations all over the walls, including pillars, tapestries, paintings, plants, even the odd statue and the odd mounted weapons hanging from the walls, and a giant skeleton from something resembling a snake, maybe a dragon. As Izuku stood there and looked around, he heard someone yell out to them. Hey kid, never seen you around here before. You new around here? Izuku let out a small eep and turned to the man. He was huge, with shoulder armor held on by, were those pink suspenders? Each their own. Izuku bowed to him. Yes, I'm new to town. And in a sudden spur of confidence that Izuku didn't know he even had in him, he asked, is it true you guys are needing help fighting the Devil King's armies? The big guy just looked at him, then clapped him on the shoulder, laughing, nearly knocking Archie off his perch on the teen's shoulder. Sure is, but only if you got a death wish, kid, and if that's what you got, then dying is what you'll get. No one's crazy to take on the Devil King and his armies, it's pure suicide. Guild admission's over at that desk, but before you go, I have to ask what's with the cat and the tin can? Izuku wanted to rub his shoulder and winced internally. The guy was a beast, that smack had hurt. Oh, Archie is my familiar, and this is my golem. Thank you, sir. Enjoy the rest of your day. Well, he's just chock full of encouragement, isn't he? I feel so motivated. Archie huffed out as soon as they were out of hearing range. Shaking his head at his new friend's sarcasm, he made his way over to the counter the man had pointed to, where he was greeted by a younger woman dressed in a nicer outfit than the other servers. Good afternoon. How can I help you today? The lady asked. Izuku smiled back at her. I would like to apply to become an adventurer. Izuku asked, sorting through his bag to find the money he had requested from the angel. Of course. You'll need 100 eris, and I can prepare your adventurer card. The lady smiled at him. Izuku found a large pouch at the bottom of his backpack. Feeling the coins within, he pulled the pouch out and quickly began counting the money before handing it to the young woman. Oh, and by the way, my name is Luna, so if you ever need any help or need information on places or job requests, feel free to ask. The newly named Luna introduced herself. Now you only need to place your hand over this orb here, and the artifact will do the rest, Luna instructed Izuku as the transaction finished. Just like this. Izuku asked as he did as instructed, and then watched in awe as the artifact did its work, writing on the card with laser-like lights at great speed. Once the light show finished, Luna took the card to read it aloud, gaining the attention of the boy, who didn't know what to expect. He wished to hear Hiro's occupation, but he guessed that was a hard-earned title, not a job class. Izuku Midoriya, right? Let's see, your attack power is pretty average, your defense is just below average, slightly above average endurance, your luck is about average, not that it's needed for adventurers, and this is interesting, you have an incredibly high intelligence. Your wisdom is well above the average, especially for someone your age, an incredibly rare combination, you must read a lot, Most boys your age are only thinking about swinging swords around, and it would seem your magical power is very high as well. Luna trailed off while looking at the boy's profile, wondering why it said nothing of his noble upbringing. She wondered briefly if maybe the country of his birth taught commoners and the nobility, because commoners don't have family names, and he had one. Is something wrong, Miss Luna? Izuku asked after he noticed that Luna was spacing out, making her give herself a shake. Forgive me, it's nothing, I'm just looking at your class options. You can choose from these: priest, wizard, thief, and adventurer, but that's the weakest class. Unfortunately, your physical attributes do not allow you access to the martial classes, at least not right now. However, it also appears that you can pick from a few of the specialized class options. It looks like you can pick either creator. Honestly, that is pretty rare. You might explain your metal friend there. What's this? Holy shit! Luna exclaimed loudly, turning to look at the young teen in stunned silence for several moments. Miss Luna, is something wrong? Izuku asked worriedly. Surely it wasn't something bad. The young woman gave herself a shake. No, I apologize. I was just surprised. You also have the option to choose one of two super rare, specialized classes. The first is the Dragon Knight class, and the second is the Sage class. Izuku felt his jaw drop. Sure, he wanted something that would put him a little closer to his idol, All Might, like a knight, paladin, or even a crusader, but then again, it was his fault for not taking it upon himself to train his body. Instead, he ended up training his mind more than anything else, between all the studying and logic-based puzzles and riddles, not to mention those tests that he received by an online friend of his, #1 demonic rat overlord. His friend had a great sense of humor, plus the guy was a genius. But to find out he could choose such a rare class, that was also incredibly powerful from the sound of it, was a very welcome bit of information. But, then again, he still had his unnamed golem, which he really should give a name to, who was more or less the muscle. Quick question, what is a sage? Izuku asked, wanting to hear the description of the class. Of course, as I said, it's a super rare class that is hardly ever seen, mostly because certain stats are never high enough. For example, you have high intelligence, wisdom, and a high magical power. While pulling the class description up, Luna said, the Sage class is a druid who can use both elemental, healing, and support magic. Oh, how Izuku liked that description. Something about it called out to him. As he thought about it, it was almost as if the class was specifically made for him, what with him being from a different world and having met a goddess and an angel. Then there was his cheats, so he guessed that played a role. His staff alone gave him a few spells that he could learn, something he would have to get to work on soon. Luna then continued. If I'm being honest, a sage is on par with the archwizard and archpriest classes. Basically all types of magic are at your command. I'll take it. Izuku burst out in excitement, startling both Luna and Archie. He originally had wanted to get a detailed explanation of each class and weigh the pros and cons against each other, but the sorcerer class felt and sounded right. And the idea that he could cast nearly all types of spells he learned was just too appealing not to pick. What? Oh, well, of course. Luna chirped while selecting the class for him. Here you go, and welcome to the guild, Mr. Izuku. She beamed as she handed him his new guild membership card. Izuku grinned, taking his new card in hand. This was his new start, his new beginning, until he defeated the Devil King and wished to go home. Nothing could ruin this moment. Crash. The sound of the guild hall doors slamming open had all heads turning. There you are, a loud, proud female voice boasted. Turning his head, his eyes landed on a fuming former goddess and a conflicted-looking Kazuma. Izuku had to take back that one thought. This would definitely ruin his moment. He can mark goal number 6 off his list because it would be next to impossible to do. It had been over an hour since Aqua and Kazuma had shown up at the guild. While Kazuma was not an issue, Aqua had thoroughly embarrassed Izuku. She screeched at him, demanding that he pay for all her meals and the fee for her guild membership card. But Izuku was determined not to allow someone to bully him again. He acted like he didn't even know her, putting on a confused and innocent face, then asking, "Who are you?" This unexpected response shocked Aqua and, believe it or not, even brought a moment of enjoyment to Kazuma. Somewhere in Izuku's old world, an elderly man giggled uncontrollably for no reason. Perhaps Kazuma wasn't a bad person after all. For all Izuku knew, Kazuma understood why he acted like he didn't know who Aqua was. Of course, her screeching went to new heights upon his denying knowing her, at which point Luna, the incredible savior she was, had to step in and threaten to have Aqua removed from the guild hall if she didn't stop harassing people. That had shut the blue-haired girl up real quick. A commotion had started when Aqua had her card made. Apparently her stats, except luck and intelligence, really that last one was not a surprise, were maxed, giving her access to most of the advanced classes, and had promptly picked Archpriest, who knew a goddess could be so vain, and for the past 30 minutes she had been making a lot of noise while selecting her skill set with her starting skill points, which she had like 40 points to use. The girl even tried to rub her class and skill points in Izuku and Kazuma's faces. Still, she was quickly shut down when Luna pointed out that Izuku had a rare class that had never been an option for beginners like him. Then he added salt to the wound when he secretly gestured to Archie, his newly named golem, Dekairu, his coat and staff, and mouthing that he had better cheats. Kazuma had had a fully bellied laugh at Aqua's expense for 5 minutes, before getting his adventurer's card. He was now wallowing in self-pity over how weak he was, muttering how a 14-year-old was stronger than he was. Izuku felt a little bad for the guy and made a promise to himself to help Kazuma out should he need it. He expected Kazuma to need help a lot. Well, this can't be any worse than being quirkless, Izuku muttered as he browsed his card. It was interesting how it acted like a touchscreen, and he could scroll through the information, taking note of his data as he did so, and how well organized everything was. The skills section fascinated him, allowing him to see what skills were passive and how others required activation, which, in most cases, required mana. A few had timers, meaning they could use them free of cost, but were limited to a few times per day. He also noticed that sages had by far more skills to choose from than the other classes, meaning that if he wanted to be greedy he could add a skill point to the lot of them, or be extremely picky and go for the skills that would suit his personality and future fighting style, and improve those by adding more skill points, of which he, surprisingly, learned that he had exactly 22 points. In this case, Izuku figured it would be better to be extremely picky and carefully weigh each skill's pros and cons. For example, there were 3 spells he was looking at that would be incredibly useful along with the 3 spells he got with his staff: Arcane Barrier, Mana Bolt, Telekinesis, and then the 3 he thought would be helpful to have: Sleep, Paralyze, and Poison. Sure, they were status effects, but still incredibly useful, especially if someone wanted to make a quick escape, finish off a target quickly, or avoid a situation altogether. And if someone continued to bother him, she'd find herself a target for 2 of said spells. Something he found interesting about these skills was that he could stack them, meaning he could paralyze a monster, poison it, and then put it to sleep, and then let the poison finish it off in its sleep. That was probably a little morbid, but oh well. What should I start with? He muttered to himself, maybe a combination of support, healing, and offense, quickly selecting Arcane Barrier, Mana Bolt, and Telekinesis, adding 2 points to each, followed by Sleep, Poison, and Paralyze with 1 point each, Bark Skin, which was another valuable skill for both himself and others, thus another point went in, so that covered support, followed by Heal, Cure Poison, that covered the healing, another point each, and finally he chose Appraisal, another. Finally, another 3 went directly into raising his health. For now, Izuku felt that his chosen skills gave him a good starting point. He was excited about the adventures that lay ahead and the potential for growth. He knew that there would be other skills he wanted to acquire later, but for now he was ready to embark on his journey with his current set of skills. Next, he scrolled through the rest of his information and happily found the sections for Archie and Dekairu. From there, he added a point about Archie's health, defense, and fire breath. Dekairu received similar points, though his went to his health, defense, and attack power. Looking out one of the windows, Izuku guessed it was around noon. He could do an easy quest to help him learn the ropes. Getting up from his spot at the table, he made his way over to the quest board. Surely there was something he could do by himself. How about that one? Archie pointed his paw at one of the requests. Spotting the one the familiar was pointing at, one that was a simple request in gathering medicinal herbs, he grabbed it before taking it up to the registration counter, a slight skip in his step, pausing only briefly to check to make sure Aqua was still busy, surrounded by her new adoring fans, before rushing up to the counter. Within minutes, he was out the door. Aqua and, by extension, Kazuma were none the wiser. Later that night, as Izuku lay in his nice soft bed with Archie curled up next to him. The same time, Dikairu sat in a corner of the room they had rented for the next week, which cost him 350 eris. He had realized one fundamental law about adventurers, especially newbies like himself. They were all overglorified cheap part-time workers. Quite literally, that was what they were. From patching roofs to hauling wood, simple and easy jobs for the new, fresh-faced beginners like himself, and if you were a rookie, then you got low extermination requests with terrible pay and little to no gratitude. Oh, sure, he had gotten a good pay for the medicinal herbs he had brought in, mainly because for some odd reason the plants were of exceptional quality, especially at this time of year. He had flashed a grin at Archie. The dragon had been a massive help in finding the herbs, some of which he kept for himself, plans already in the making to begin his side career in potion brewing. "This is going to be harder than I thought," he muttered into the dimly lit room. He was under no illusions that he, a level 1 sage, would be laying siege to the Devil King's castle. If such a task were possible, he would have a lot of work ahead of him. If he remembered how most RPG games worked, he would need a lot of help. But then again, he wouldn't need an actual party. After all, he had a dragon and a golem. Those two, with more training, would likely even the odds on the battlefield. Regardless, however, he knew he would still have to either add party members or join an existing party, but even then, the chances of any current party wanting to take on the Devil King and his army were very slim. "Seems like I'll have my work cut out for me. We'll do a few quests tomorrow," the teen muttered as he finally rolled over onto his side, blowing out the candle by his bed. Plans and ideas were already forming in his mind as he finally drifted off to sleep. It was dark. That was the first thing Izuku took note of. The second thing he noticed was that he wasn't standing. No, he was floating through a dark expanse of nothing. At first, he thought he was back in Aqua's realm, but that couldn't be right. Even though Aqua's realm was dark, it still had some form of light. Another thing that worried him was that he couldn't move. Not a single muscle would move. He was starting to panic. Why was he here? Where was he? Then he heard it, the sound of sobbing in the distance. It sounded so close yet so far away. "Izuku's come back?" He could make out 2 words amidst the sobbing. It sounded like his mom. He wanted to call out and tell her he was okay, but he couldn't even do that. Then he felt a tugging sensation, one that began to pull him away from his mother's sad voice. "No, don't, Mom needs me." He tried to struggle against the pull, but the more he tried to force himself to fight back, the harder the tugging pull became. His mother's broken sobs were getting farther away. "No, stop, I have to go to her, please." A bright glow began to form behind him. "No!" Izuku cried as he shot up, one hand outstretched as if he was trying to grab hold of his dream. As if to take himself back to his mother's voice so that he could comfort her. The early sunlight was slowly creeping its way through the curtains of the window. Looking around frantically, he began to realize that the events of the day before had, in fact, not been a dream. He wasn't at home in his All Might-themed room. No, he was still in the dull, expressionless room at the local inn. Taking several calming breaths, he lay his head back onto his pillow and stared at the ceiling. "That was a horrible and cruel dream," he grouched to no one, not expecting a reply. "Are you all right?" Turning his head, he was met with Archie's worried expression. Izuku ran a gentle hand down the dragon's back. "I will be," he told him softly. Looking towards the window, he guessed he had at least another hour before any shops opened, so he might as well get up and start working on an outline of what he needed to accomplish and how he should accomplish specific goals. Sitting up, he reached over to the nightstand, grabbed one of his notebooks and the pen he had laid out last night, and opened to the first page, rereading what he had written down when he arrived. 1. The first town is called Axel, the town of beginners, and it is supposedly the friendliest town to start in. 2. Warning, I'm not meant to tell the inhabitants I come from another world. If asked about my origins, say I'm from a distant country and change the subject, will something bad happen if I do tell them? Is this to prevent the people from this world thinking I'm crazy, or so they don't think I'm some kind of deity? 3. Once an Axel, I can do whatever I want. I can either find the Adventurers Guild and pay the admission fee, choose a class, and work my way up to being able to defeat the Devil King. Or I could find some other applicable trade. It sounds easy enough if I go by gaming logic, but as this is not a game, it could take months to even years before I am strong enough to face the Devil King. Or just take the easy life and follow the age-old rule of ignorance is bliss. 4. The language of the locals has been downloaded into my brain. If I were talking Japanese, reading, writing, and speaking, everything would now be in this other world's language. Sounds reasonable, simple, and to the point, so I could just ask for directions. Also, as a side note, if I don't want people reading my notebooks, write it in Japanese. 5. Once, if I join the guild, I should find a shop or find out if I can buy supplies from the guild. I will need new clothes and equipment, so I should probably rent a room. I will look into that tomorrow, except the room part, which can be done today. Then, I will do at least one simple and easy quest to understand how it's done. 6. Avoid the former goddess Aqua. Don't feel like we will get along. While reviewing the list, he mentally checked off the rent a room and the do one quest items. Flipping to the next page, he began jotting down plans and ideas. He first needed to do some exercises, perhaps a lap around the village every other morning. And on those mornings that he didn't run laps around the town, he could always do some basic exercises. Additionally, he added that he needed to get new clothes because he had no desire to continue wearing his middle school uniform. He also wanted to see if he could find an armorer or weapons shop. He'd like to get Dekairu some basic equipment until he has enough funds to equip him fully with quality armor and weapons. Also needed to ask Luna about buying a house or if he could purchase land because renting a room like the one he was currently in would quickly eat up his funds, and he would rather not have that. After finishing up, he noticed it was still pretty early, so he decided it was best to get a start on some light exercises. So he began with some stretches, followed by a round of squats, push-ups, and sit-ups, and even though he didn't know all the poses, he went ahead and did what little he knew of yoga. Admittedly, he couldn't do much, but he figured at least 20 of each exercise for the first week would be a good start, and then he could gradually increase the amount he did. As he went through his light workout routine, his mind had begun to wander back to his dream. What was up with that dream? He asked himself as he began doing some seated toe touches. Maybe the stress of dying is finally catching up to me. I mean, I didn't have a chance to accept the fact I died. Maybe that was it, just stress and not really coming to terms. But then why did he hear his mom's voice? It sounded like she was in distress. She was so sad. Shaking his head lightly, he hurried through the rest of the exercises. He shouldn't be concerned with dreams. They were just that, dreams. Finishing up with the exercises, he washed the light sheen of sweat off with a rag from the water basin in the corner of his room. It was one of the few things he did not like. He would kill to have an actual shower. The only positive was that there was a local bathhouse, and you could buy soaps pretty cheap. Getting redressed in his school uniform, without his school jacket, and sliding his new coat on, he decided to head down into the pub part of the inn to eat breakfast. Archie took the opportunity to hitch a ride on his shoulders, while Dekairu followed behind. Once there, the trio was promptly met with the owner of the inn, a portly middle-aged woman named Agatha, who for some reason decided to make it her mission to stuff him with as much food as she possibly could. According to her, he was far too small, and a growing boy needed to eat more. So he was forced into a chair and a large plate covered in eggs, large thick slices of bacon, fried tomatoes, several pieces of toast with butter, and Agatha's homemade blackberry jam, a small platter of blueberry muffins, and a large pitcher of milk. Izuku gulped. The woman's look told him all he needed to know. It screamed, "Eat all of this or else." He could not eat all of it. Thankfully, Archie could help eat a good portion. After an hour of eating and cleaning the plate, the trio escaped. Now he was out looking for a shop that dealt with clothing. He wanted to get new shirts, pants, and shoes that wouldn't cause him to stick out like a sore thumb like his current red sneakers did. 1 hour later. Stepping out of the shop, Izuku couldn't help but grin at his new purchases. He now had 3 white button-up shirts alongside his white school shirt, and an additional 2 pairs of tight-fitting black pants. On his feet he now had a set of nice brown leather boots that went up to just below his knees. To top it all off, he also found a lovely green button-up vest that he grabbed along with a few extra pairs of socks and undergarments. And it only cost him an additional 400 eris. The whole ensemble was topped off with his green trench coat. Archie and Deku stood outside waiting for him as he exited. The dragon disguised as a cat looked him up and down. Deku just pet his metal head to the side. "Not bad, Izuku, you could pass for a local now," Archie teased. Izuku grinned and took it as a compliment. It was true about what they said, clothes do make a difference in helping with one's confidence. Feeling more confident, he decided it was time to take another quest. Turning down the road, he made his way to the guild hall. "So," Archie began, "what's on today's agenda?" he asked, retaking his spot on Izuku's shoulders. "I figured we could take a few more easy quests and try to build up our funds. I know I have money, but I'd rather not blow through it," Izuku confided. Archie nodded, understanding. "Smart. I'd suggest putting some of it back for emergencies, using only what we make from the job requests, and leaving the rest alone." Izuku nodded. As he walked up to the door to the guild, he opened it wide enough to allow Deku to enter. Once the golem entered, he followed behind. Of course, however, he should have foreseen it, should have noticed the tension in the air, but the moment he stepped through the doors of the guild hall, he was assaulted. And it didn't take a genius to guess who it was. "You!" came the outraged shriek that caused Izuku to wince. "Where in the hell have you been?" The blue-haired girl was suddenly in his face, causing him to lean away from her. "Why the hell were you not sleeping in the stables? And how in the hell do you already have the funds to buy new clothes?" Good grief, Izuku thought. This woman was a banshee, and the screaming in his face angrily reminded him a bit too much of Bakugo. Holding a hand up, he decided he didn't want to deal with this. Sure, if Kazuma asked he'd probably tell him, and if he decides to give the guy a few thousand eris to get a few things for himself, just to PSS the former goddess off, well then that was his prerogative now, wasn't it? But in the meantime, "Sleep," the greenette intoned. "How did a worthless, thud, snore dash?" Izuku watched in mild amusement as his first spell cast knocked the girl out. Looking up, he saw Kazuma sitting at a lone table with his eyes blown wide in shock, staring down at the sleeping goddess, before he moved his eyes up to the greenettes, before throwing his head back to cackle like a loon. "Dude, that was awesome, The brunette laughed as Izuku walked over and sat across from the guy, who had managed to calm himself down and was now snickering lightly. "Dude, that was great. When I have the skill points, can you teach me that?" the older teen asked hopefully, because a skill like that would be invaluable when dealing with her. Izuku blushed slightly with a small smile, rubbing at the back of his neck. "Sure," he chirped. "I also have another one that'll also be useful in stopping monsters. It's called Paralyze, and will stop them from moving, and according to what the description said, the more the target struggles, the more damage they do to themselves." Kazuma stared at Izuku in awe. He hadn't thought the younger teen would say yes, but sure. Enough, the greenette had agreed, and even offered to teach him a second one. "You know, I don't think we've been properly introduced. Kazuma Satu." The older teen held out a hand. "Izuku Midoriya." Izuku replied, taking the other's hand and giving it a firm shake. "So I have to ask, where were you and what's with the new digs?" Kazuma asked while pointing at Izuku's new outfit. "Well, you know how you chose Aqua?" Izuku started. The older boy nodded. "After you guys left, I may have pointed out that it was incredibly unfair that you got a full-fledged goddess, argued that she was at least worth several of those divine treasures, and pointed out that none really suited me. So the angel gave me the option to pick up 7 cheats," Izuku explained to the brunette's amazement. "Well, wait. So you got 7, the elder blurted out. "What were they?" the teen asked hopefully. Izuku decided to humor him. "Well, to start with, I have a wizard's staff, my coat, Archie and Deku here, 5,000 eris, a skill in alchemy herbalism, and a potion guide with several potion recipes." Izuku smirked at the end of his explanation. The older boy's face was priceless. You rented a room, didn't you? Came the deadpan reply. Yup, the younger one nodded happily. It was nice and cozy. Please don't rub it in. Izuku chuckled slightly while scratching at his cheek nervously. So what are your plans for today? Kazuma continued, taking note of Izuku's nervousness, and decided to focus on something else. He wasn't cruel. Besides, the kid reminded him of his younger brother. He wasn't going to badger the kid for information. Oh, I'm planning on doing a few easy quests. Izuku beamed. Sweet, so are you doing it by yourself or— Wait, never mind, you've got that robot-looking dude there and your cat? The elder finished with a tilt of his head. Archie decided now was the correct time to let the cat out of the bag. I'll have you know I am more than just a regular cat. The feline explained, standing on his back legs, crossing his front legs over his chest. Kazuma's jaw dropped. Oh, forgive me, meow. Archie added, waving his paws in a Tada motion. It took an extra hour and a half before Izuku, Archie, and Dikaira managed to leave the guild hall. A large portion of the occupants within the hall had been utterly fascinated with Archie upon his revealing that he could talk, and more so when it was revealed that he was a dragon and not an actual cat. That's not to say there weren't those amongst the male population as well, who weren't fascinated with Archie, as a few wizards had stopped over by the table the group was sitting at to ask Archie and Izuku questions about the familiar. Thankfully, Archie had a pretty convincing backstory, one where he was a special type of dragon that could only be found in Izuku's very distant and hard-to-reach homeland. Dikairu, too, had garnered a fair share of admirers, particularly among the creator class and a few warriors. His unique ability to swap out armor and weapons, and the potential to add extra parts and limbs, had never failed to impress. Sadly, not everyone was enthralled by Archie and Dikairu, as one person continued to glare at both the little dragon and, by extension, Izuku. Yes, Aqua had woken up from her forced nap and had not been happy that no one was paying her any attention. And upon seeing a large portion of the female population and, to a lesser extent, the male population, both gushing over the little dragon or being intrigued by him, or the fact that Izuku was being bombarded with questions on how Dikairu was made and what all the golem could do. She had found a table to sulk at after Izuku threatened to put her back to sleep when she went to start to yell at the boy again. She then thought it would be wise to try to hit the greenette. However, the moment her fist raised in the air, Izuku had flinched slightly, which had been noticed by both Kazuma, Archie, and Dikairu. Surprisingly, she never had the chance to hit Izuku before her wrist was grabbed by another adventurer by the name of Dust. You sure you want to do that? The blonde asked warningly, reddish-brown eyes that, while looking friendly, held a sharp edge to them, while pointing with his free hand. Aqua, following the finger, froze at the sight of both dragon and golem ready to attack her if she dared to follow through with her punch, one who was ready to pounce with smoke drifting from his jaws, and the other already drawing its massive metal fists back, prepared to strike her. Aqua did the smart thing and walked away with a huff. After she had left, the blonde had quickly introduced himself as Dust, and had quickly started up a conversation with the younger teen. Izuku had learned that Dust was a dragon knight, another rare specialized class that used a covenant with a dragon. Izuku found that he quite liked Dust, they got along well, and he was thankful to the blonde teen for stopping Aqua. Now the trio was walking down the road to a nearby farm to deal with a rat infestation. Archie was once more perched upon Izuku's shoulders, in his cat form, while Dikaira followed behind carrying a pack of supplies, while also holding his new wooden shield and the short iron sword. The request Izuku had taken was that the farmer was having issues with large rats, which were destroying his crops. He wanted someone to chase them out of his fields and destroy the entire nest. It seemed like a reasonable job, and for an extermination quest, it was well, a little over 1,500 eris. The only other extermination job was killing giant toads, but Luna and a few others had told him no, something about him and Archie being eaten alive, and that they weren't ready to face monsters. So he went with the rats. After all, rats were pretty small, and between him and Archie, they should get the job done relatively quickly. Hey Archie, the green-haired adventurer began. Yes, the dragon replied. When Aqua was getting ready to hit me, were you going to attack her? He inquired, wondering if his familiar would have attacked her. This question had surprised Archie and made him wonder briefly why his friend would ask such a question before the information about Izuku's past life in Japan flooded his mind, reminding him that the teen had not had an easy life. Yes, I would have. The familiar informed the teen. Why though? Izuku asked quietly, confused as to why the dragon would do such a thing. Izuku, I am your familiar. It's my duty to protect you. Despite our short time together, consider you a friend, and friends always look out for each other, the dragon reassured Izuku in a gentle tone. Izuku felt his heart rate spike at the admission. Besides, Archie continued, I was not going to allow that poor excuse of a goddess to lay a single finger on you. Izuku's smile widened as he reached up to scratch under Archie's chin, eliciting a contented purr from the familiar. This simple act of affection strengthened their bond, making them feel more connected than ever. It wasn't much longer before the trio continued down the road, before they came across a peculiar sight. A group of green and purple slimes was sitting in the middle of the road, surrounding a lone blue slime. The group of slimes kept sending tendrils of their bodies to jab and hit at the little blue slime, all the while making the blue one cry out as it was shoved and knocked around. Moti, the blue slime, cried out in pain at a particularly harsh jab from a purple-colored slime. The scene with the slimes, a cruel display of bullying, struck a chord with Izuku. It brought back memories he had long tried to forget, stirring up a mix of emotions. Without thinking, he rushed at the group of slimes. Get away from him, the young sage shouted while kicking one slime and sending it flying away, where it impacted into the side of a tree with a loud splat. Archie, who had jumped from his perch on Izuku's shoulder, shifted to his dragon form, began to launch fireballs at the rest of the slimes. Izuku was quick to scoop up the lone blue slime as the others either scattered or were consumed by Archie's fire, or in the case of a select few who weren't quick to escape, met their end at the hands or feet of Deku, who while could not express emotion appeared to take great delight in stomping on a few of them. As soon as the last slime had been vaporized by Archie's flames or met their demise at the end of Deku's metal feet, Izuku looked down at the slime monster that he had wrapped protectively within his arms. The poor little guy was shivering and pressed up to Izuku's chest as close as it could get. Are you okay? Izuku inquired with a gentle, warm tone, his concern evident in his voice. The slime tilted its body up as if looking up at him. Moti, came the fearful reply, a unique form of communication that piqued Izuku's curiosity. Izuku ran a gentle hand over the creature, feeling its smooth, gelatin-like texture. It was a strange sensation, not at all what one would expect from a slime. The creature wasn't wet or slimy, but it was undeniably alive and in need of comfort. Hey, it's okay, you're safe now, I'm here. Izuku soothed, continuing to rub his hand over the top of the creature gently. After a few minutes, the shivering finally stopped. Moat. The slime crooned, looking up at his saviors. Archie had latched onto Izuku's back to look over his shoulder. Walking a ways away from the short fight scene, Izuku found a quiet spot under a large, leafy tree. He squatted down and placed the little slime back down onto the soft, mossy ground. Here you go, buddy, Izuku began, taking a quick look around to ensure there were no other slimes nearby. Now you don't have to worry about those bullies, you should be safe now. Izuku stood up, patting the slime. Bye, little guy, take care. Izuku called to the creature as he, Archie, and Deku continued back down the road. Emoti, the creature crooned as it turned pink, then green, nodding its entire body as if in confirmation, before turning blue and hopping after the green-haired boy. Moti, plop, plop. Moti, plop, plop, plop. Moti, plop, 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 plop. After about 5 minutes of listening to his little shadow, Izuku grinned at Archie. I think we have a little friend following us, he informed his friend. Yes, it would appear so. Are you going to bring him with us? The feline asked, peeking over his shoulders. Izuku hummed, it would be nice to have another friend with us. The teen pondered. Then let's bring him with us, the dragon stated with a smile. Izuku gave a bright grin, stopping in his tracks to turn and look back the way he had come, and sure enough, there was the little slime hopping along. Moti, plop. Moti, plop. Modi, plop. Izuku grinned, shaking his head, kneeling to wait for the little slime to make his way up to him. Emoti! The slime exclaimed excitedly, its joy infectious and spreading to Izuku and his friends. Hey there! Izuku chirped. Emoti, came the reply as the slime turned pink. Izuku couldn't help but smile widely. The little slime was just too cute. Do you want to come with me and my friends here? The teen asked. Emoti, emoti, emoti! The slime cried happily, turning green, bouncing up and down. Then welcome to the team, little guy. Izuku announced, extending a hand for the slime to hop onto. Once the slime happily bounced onto Izuku's hand, Izuku lifted the happily chirping little slime and placed it on his shoulder, where it proceeded to hop up on top of his head and snuggled into his hair, where it peeked out with a happy squeal. Izuku beamed at the creature's happiness, his heart swelling with joy at the sight of the little slime's excitement. We need to give you a name? Izuku thought out loud as he restarted his trek towards the farm. He began to ponder names. How about Kamaji? I know it's not original, but I noticed that you've changed colors at least twice, which, if I'm right, is a way for you to express yourself, am I right? Izuku asked, and the slime then turned green with a happy squeal before reverting to its original blue color. Emoti! All right, Kamaji it is then, Izuku nodded. So am I right about you changing colors to express your emotions? Moti! The slime cooed, turning green. That's so cool, the teen exclaimed, causing the newly named Kamaji to turn pink. That is pretty cool. He must be some sort of special breed of slime. We should ask Miss Luna when we get done with this job. Izuku gave a nod. It wouldn't be until that evening that he had a new addition to his adventurer's card. 30 minutes later, the newly formed group of 4, consisting of the determined and resourceful Izuku, the inquisitive and loyal Archie, the stoic and protective Dikairu, and the timid yet resilient Kamaji, found themselves stepping onto a large farm. Even from what they could see just walking along the fence line, they could see the damage done supposedly by the rats. Izuku had the sneaking suspicion that the rats were a lot bigger than what he thought they were, based on the damage they could see, or that there were a lot more than they believed. Walking up to the cottage, Izuku took note of the boarded-up windows and locked doors. The farmer and his family had taken up temporary residence at an inn within town, but the infestation was so bad that they had to abandon the farm. The once vibrant and lively farm now lay in eerie silence, with the overgrown fields and the abandoned tools painting a picture of despair. Izuku hadn't had a chance to meet with the family, but he figured he would after the job was completed. So what's the plan, Izuku? Archie asked as he hopped off the teen's shoulder, shifting forms as he did so, wings flapping slightly as he landed on the ground. Well, Izuku began, first off, we probably need to search the field, see if we can locate any rats that are currently running about, try to take out a few, and see if the rest will flee so we can follow them back to their nest. Once we find it, we need to eradicate the entire nest, he explained with an air of authority, as he reached over his shoulder to pull his staff out of its straps. He gripped the black wooden tightly, the green stone within its confines glowing brightly. You know how to use that thing, right? Archie asked curiously, with a hint of worry. Well, not really, aside from point and invoke my spells, Izuku began, not taking his eyes off of the weapon, but I know that as long as I'm holding it, I get a boost in mana, and I don't have to worry about someone stealing it. He gave the weapon an experimental spin before slamming the butt of the staff into the ground, turning to look into the fields. Let's go hunting, he proclaimed to his 3 companions. He turned to the golem in the group, arm up. The golem set its pack down before strapping the wooden shield to its arms and drawing the sword from its sheath. Izuku couldn't wait to equip the metallic being with actual gear, because that short sword might as well have been a kitchen knife to the large magical construct. Well, let's go find those rats, he announced, making his way towards a small field of cornstalks, with Kamaji and Dikairu, while Archie took to the sky. Entering the cornfield, one of the only places that could hide rats, Izuku could immediately feel the eyes upon his person. To say it was a terrifying sensation would be an understatement. Even knowing he wasn't alone did not make him feel any better. Something deep and primal within him told him he wasn't at the top of the food chain anymore. And that worried him. As Izuku moved deeper through the stalks of corn, now and then something would move in the corner of his vision, but the moment he turned his head in the direction of the movement, all he could see was the swaying of the stalks. He nearly jumped when a tendril of slime tapped him on the shoulder. "Emote," came the hushed whisper from his slime companion as he pointed off towards a section of the field with his tendril. Following the tendril, Izuku saw the long, whip-like tail as it disappeared into the labyrinth of corn. Crouching down and readying his staff, the young sage carefully and quietly went in the direction of his quarry. To his surprise, Deku had followed his lead and was crouched down, moving carefully and quietly, which was an interesting if odd sight. Archie was nowhere in sight, having gone to look in another section of the field. Together, the trio crept closer, and he began to make out the sounds of something chewing on what he assumed was corn. As he took the last few quiet steps, he found himself peering into a small clearing where it was apparent it had been picked apart and flattened by numerous rats. Izuku froze the moment his eyes landed on it, and in the words of one Katsuki Bakugo, "Oh! Fing! Hell! No!" Either someone failed to report on what kind of rat he was dealing with, or his theory from earlier about them being way bigger than he believed them to be was correct, that or these guys were well fed or on steroids, because oh holy shit was that thing big, no. That thing was massive. The sheer size of the rat was a shock, challenging Izuku's preconceived notions and adding a new level of danger to their mission. Izuku could only stare in horror at the size of the thing. It was bigger than Archie, almost as big as his former neighbor's border collie. The rat was a dark gray, with patches of missing fur, and had dry, scaly-looking skin. Its freaking claws were more like small knives than anything else, and don't get him going on the size of those dmed teeth either. Izuku knew the moment he returned to town he was going to demand Luna to give him a dmed book on the animals and monsters of this world, because there was no way in hell he was ever going to be blindsided by extermination quests ever again. Because 1, 2, what the F dash, and 3, Kami it smells him. And sure enough, the large, hideous creatures turned their nose up into the air and started twitching. After a moment, it stood on its hind legs, slowly turning its head, keeping its nose in the air before turning its black beady eyes onto Izuku. Izuku couldn't move. He was frozen stiff, paralyzed by fear. What am I doing? I can't do this, I'm no hero, I'm not brave like All Might, he thought to himself as terror gripped him as he eyed the large rodent. Not daring to blink or take his eyes off of the thing, he could feel Kamaji trembling from within his hood. The fear was overwhelming, but he knew he had to be strong for his companions. He had someone to protect now. Kamaji couldn't fight, at least not yet, and he wasn't alone. Deku stood just behind him, unmoving and silent, sword and shield at the ready. That's right, he had someone to protect now. Kamaji couldn't fight, at least not yet, and he wasn't alone. Deku stood just behind him, unmoving and silent, sword and shield at the ready. The fear was palpable, hanging in the air like a heavy fog, as Izuku realized the enormity of the task before him. The rat got back down on all fours, giving a loud hiss at the trembling teen. Izuku could only hold his staff out in front of him like one would hold a spear. He was not ready for this. The rat continued to hiss and screech, but Izuku was frozen in fear. He had thought he could handle a simple rat, but this was no ordinary rat. Why was he doing this again? He unknowingly began to lower the tip of his staff. That was all the rat needed to take a running leap. Izuku stumbled backwards, falling as he did. So he instinctively raised his arms, closing his eyes as he wished desperately for something sharp. Something wet splattered upon his face. Opening his eyes, he found Deku standing protectively over him, the metal golem's round eyes glowing brightly, his sword arm outstretched, a reassuring presence in the chaos. Chancing a look, Izuku found to his absolute horror that the rat had impaled itself on the sword's blade, and was still very much alive, a terrifying sight that sent shivers down his spine. As it thrashed and clawed at the blade in a feeble attempt to reach Izuku and, by extension, Deku, it continued to hiss, growl, and screech. The young sage wasn't sure how he managed to do it, but he forced himself to get back on his feet, Picking his staff back up from the ground, he moved just in time for his silent protector to slam the rats back into the ground with a loud squelching sound, driving the blade deeper into the horrid creature. The large rat gave a terrifying scream as it finally stopped thrashing, and all movement ceased. Izuku could only watch as life bled from its eyes. Deku yanked his weapon out of the carcass. The smell and sight of the blood was what did it in for Izuku. Leaning over and away from the body, Izuku promptly threw up. Emoti moti. Kamaji crooned as he patted Izuku with a single tendril on his back, trying to comfort the teen, as if trying to tell him it was all right. Izuku wanted to cry, he really did, he had just witnessed something being killed before his very eyes, sure it was a monster, animal, whatever the hell it was. But still, a life had been taken. But in that moment he knew it was either him or the rat. And Deku chose to protect him. Emoti, moti, emo. Kamaji began only to cut himself off before seizing up. Moti, moti, moti. The slime started to cry out in warning, frantically tugging on Izuku and pointing at his weapon. Picking up his discarded weapon, Izuku looked at Kamaji in confusion. What? Izuku never got to finish as a dark figure launched itself out of the corn stalks. Instinctively, Izuku raised his staff, only for Deku to move faster, moving around him with an unnatural amount of grace, sword slicing through the air, as another rat met its end at the golem's hands. He didn't have much time to think, as a third came running out at him from the other side of the little clearing. Jabbing his staff towards the running creature, Izuku called out the first thing he could think of, Mana Bolt. To his surprise, a green magic circle filled with runes and glyphs appeared in the air as a green energy bolt shot outwards and impacted upon the rat's face, causing a small explosion that threw the lifeless body backwards. A fourth and fifth rat ran out together and jumped at him. He managed to dodge both, while Deku took a swipe with his sword at one, missing by a hair. Both rats spun in midair before landing and charged at them again. Throwing up a hand, Izuku shouted the first thing to pop up in his mind. Arcane Barrier! A large magic circle appeared in the air, in which both rats slammed headfirst, stunning them both and giving them a brief respite. It wasn't much, but it was more than enough to provide Deku with the advantage. With a downward slash, the golem took the head off of one of the rats, while the other dodged, lunging towards Izuku once more. Izuku, however, was quickly beginning to find his courage, his palm outstretched again. Paralyze! The rat dropped to the ground, where it proceeded to squirm and try to force itself to move. It didn't last long as Deku's blade made itself at home through the back of the beast's bald, scaly head. Kamaji took this moment to begin screaming at Izuku again. Moti, 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 while trying to tug on Izuku as much as he could from his position within Izuku's hood. At first, Izuku didn't understand what his little friend meant, but upon seeing the corn stalks moving around frantically and the screeching he could hear closing in on him, he understood perfectly that the slime was telling him to run. Deku! Izuku called out in terror, then turned and ran. He didn't get very far before long, metal arms and large metal hands scooped him and the little slime up, and the golem began to run with a speed that belied its capabilities. As Deku ran through the rows of corn, Izuku could hear the growling and snarling closing in on them. The corn stalks, taller than a grown man, swayed ominously in the wind. From the corners of his vision, he could see a few rats on either side. One launched itself at them, and he was quick to blast it with a mana bolt. A second jumped from the opposite side, which met its grisly end from a swipe of Deku's sword. Izuku's heart was thudding in his ears, fear causing adrenaline to rush through his veins. Of course, Izuku was terrified. They were being chased by who knows how many freakishly giant rats, each the size of a small horse. He'd gladly take Bakugo chasing after him any day over this. After what seemed like an eternity of Deku running and dodging away from the rodents, and taking out the odd one or two that got within distance of them to either by a random spell or the swipe of Deku's sword, the trio had broken through the last row of corn and was closing in on the stone fence of the property. With a grace he did not know the golem possessed, the magical construct leapt over the wall, and continued running towards the open field across from the farm. It was at this moment that a panicked-looking Archie dropped out of the sky to fly over their heads. Izuku, Archie called out in a frightened voice. "I think we severely underestimated this job request. Look behind you." Peering over the speeding golem's shoulder had Izuku's heart lodging itself into his throat. The sight that met him forever haunted his dreams for years to come. "Hey!" he screamed in pure terror, his eyes nearly bulging from their sockets. They weren't being chased by just a few rats. Oh no, that would be too easy. No, there had to be at least 100 of them, maybe more than that, and several of them did not look like the ones that had already been killed. No, these new ones, running with the others, were a lot bulkier and looked to have skull-like masks covering their faces, with bone-white spikes running down their backs. Returning his gaze ahead of him, tears of pure terror pouring down his face, he put on a burst of speed he was not aware he was capable of, and screamed out. "Archie, try to light them up," the greenette called. "Up to the small dragon." "With pleasure," Archie called back before swerving around. He glanced behind once more and watched as the small black-furred dragon, who seemed to have gotten a little bigger, dive-bomb the horde of rats and unleash a torrent of fire from his gaping maw, consuming a small chunk of the revolting vermin, before passing over and circling back around to unleash another stream of fire. Izuku could only let out a sigh of relief. Archie's fire gave them a temporary moment of relief, but the firewall wouldn't hold the monsters back for long. Even now, he could see them swarming, waiting for the flames that had consumed their own to go out. As if on cue, the army of large rodents began to split and run around the edges of the flames. By now, however, there was a reasonable distance between them all. Izuku turned to look ahead from the safety of Dekairu's arms, and as he did so, his eyes came across the sight of an old, broken tower. And as he gazed upon the ruins, an idea began to form in his mind. Izuku was tired. No, scratch that, he was beyond tired. It hadn't taken very long to find the rat's nest. Apparently they had taken up residence within an old abandoned mineshaft. And there were hundreds of the dead things. From the moment they had landed near the entrance, they had been besieged by the foul creatures. That had been nearly 15 minutes ago. Now here he was swinging his staff out in an arc while taking out 3, while sharpened roots speared another 4. Isamu had tried flooding the entrance to the mine with fire, and it did work to an extent, and sure it killed off the dozens already within the tunnel, but it also alerted those deeper within. The only good thing that had happened thus far was the moment Kamaji had leapt from his hiding place within Izuku's hood and had promptly started to grow to the size of one of those exercise ball and sprout tentacles like a freaking octopus or a jellyfish. What really got Izuku's attention was the fact the little blue dude now had eyes and a mouth. And now the not-so-little slime was floating around. Casting spells? Izuku wasn't sure what the spells were, but due to how most of the rats would freeze up and tremble as if in fear, Izuku could hazard a guess, and he wasn't going to look a gift horse in the mouth, using the time to finish them off with either a spell or stabbing with his staff-turned-spear. Another useful spell Kamaji began casting was one Izuku found both fascinating and terrifying at the same time, was one that caused the rats to gain a red haze around their eyes and turn on their own in a feral flurry of blood and fur. While this was going on, Izuku had managed to take a quick breath, looking over at Isamu, who was using his fists, claws, tail and fire breath to decimate an entire cluster of the vermin that saw him as the bigger threat. Some of those skull-wearing rats had tried ganging up on him and had learned the hard way that the dragon was not so easily intimidated by numbers. There has got to be an end to these things? Izuku mentally whined. The last light of day had reflected off the blue blade of his weapon. An idea popped into his head. Why hadn't he thought of this earlier? Did he not have a skill that gave him the ability to create his own spells? After all, he had subconsciously turned the round crystal into a blade. Then there were the sharpened stones and the sharpened roots. Thorns shot up from the ground, immediately killing off the several dozen that were either frozen in fear or ripping each other apart thanks to Kamaji. While this happened, the opening to the mine was quickly shut off by a massive wall of stone sealing off all of the other rats within. Why didn't I just do that earlier? He questioned nobody in particular. It may have to do with the fact we were set upon the moment we touched ground, grouched the dragon, whose stomach chose that moment to let out a loud rumble. Zuzu, can we please hurry up? I'm starving, I want a nap, and I really want a hug. Izuku patted the pouting dragon the arm. You'll just have to wait until we get back to town to eat and nap, buddy. I'll give you that hug in a few minutes. Oh, why doesn't Kamaji have to wait to eat then? Dragon whined. What's he eating? Izuku began only to turn around in time to see said slime dropping a large dead rat into his newly formed mouth. Ino Kamaji, Ino spit that out, it's disgusting, you don't even know where that thing has been at. The teen screeched in horror, waving his hands at the slime. Ah, Modi. The slime groaned as it dropped its meal to the ground, crossing two tentacles like one would cross their arms. That was something else to note. Kamaji's vocabulary seemed to have expanded, that or he was just mimicking Isamu. Izuku shook his head. Children, they were acting like children. So how are we going to finish the rest of them off? Isamu decided to change the topic away from food. I get that this wall is probably pretty strong, but it won't hold them forever. He pointed out. Izuku nodded, holding his staff in one hand, while holding the other hand out in front of him. The slime and the dragon could only watch in interest as a large glowing blue screen appeared in front of the air. Looking back down at the screen, Izuku's face split into a massive grin that looked slightly terrifying. Leaning closer, the dragon and the slime looked to see what had their friends smiling about. Oh! The two creatures reacted at the same time. The once blank screen was now revealing the inside of a darkened tunnel with dozens upon dozens of shifting and writhing bodies. Every few seconds the scene would change slightly and they'd get a glimpse of a different section of the mine filled with even more rats. You're making more screens like this along the walls of the mine, aren't you? Isamu gasped in awe. Yup. Izuku smirked, popping the key. After several long moments, it had appeared that they had finally reached a large open room. The image flickered several times, getting different views of the large room. Izuku jerked away from his creation for a moment. Nope. He denied. I am so glad we did not go in there. I refuse to be within a 10-foot radius of that thing. Nope, take it back, I do not want to even be within 10 miles of it. Izuku waved his arms frantically. Watching the boy's reaction, Isamu and Kamaji looked at each other before looking to see what had disturbed him, only to gawk in surprise. That's a big rat. Isamu stated dryly. Emoti, confirmed the slime, who had turned sickly looking green. And indeed it was a massive rat. While the two different rats they had been previously fighting were quite large, the one shown in the reflection was at least 6 feet tall. Its head and limbs were bare of hair and instead was covered in pinkish skin with oozing sores decorating its flesh. Izuku placed his hand back over the screen once more and watched as flowers began to bloom all throughout the mine. He was done with this and wanted to go back to town. We are done with this job, guys, let me change things up a little. Izuku told his friends a large flower grew before the sealed-off entrance. He steadfastly refused to stay anymore. There, those flowers are all connected and are now producing a constant stream of methane gas. Izuku explained, dismissing the screen, causing it to vanish. He looked at his friends. All right, Isamu, can you get any bigger? Isamu looked puzzled at the question but dropped down to all fours and began to grow even more, now roughly the size of a horse. Huh, what do you know, I couldn't get this large earlier? He said in confusion, his voice even deeper than before. This change in my voice, however, is going to take some time to get used to. You might have leveled up, Izuku claimed as he clambered up onto Isamu's back, taking a firm hold of a few scales. And yeah, it's weird how your voice deepens when you get bigger. Come on, Kamaji, we are done. Yay, Emoti! The slime cheered as he shrunk in on himself, losing his tentacles and went back to his small size, before bouncing up the dragon's back and up Izuku's arms to resituate himself back on Izuku's head. Once assured his passengers wouldn't fall, he gave a mighty flap of his wings and launched into the air. Once they were above the tree line, Izuku patted the dragon on the neck. Isamu, if you would be so kind, please set that flower on fire. Isamu gave a feral grin. With pleasure, he growled happily, and with a deep breath he unleashed a ball of fire at the flower. The trio watched in vindictive glee as the flower was consumed by flames, and nearly started cackling in madness when a blast of fire exploded from out of the mine. That's right, burn, you unholy rodents from hell, burn! Izuku called out. You okay up there? Isamu couldn't help but worry about Izuku's state of mind. I'm great, but if I ever see another rat again, it'll be too soon. Isamu gave a nod in agreement. Agreed. Emoji. Izuku pulled out his adventurer's card to double-check to see if the request had been completed and was relieved when he saw the gold star that confirmed that the job had been completed, and did a double-take when he took notice of his level and nearly choked upon seeing Isamu's level, and to his surprise, he saw Kamaji's name and level as well. Guys, he whispered in awe, gaining their attention, I don't think we fought normal rats. This caused Isamu to look back over his shoulder and for the slime to peek out of his from within Izuku's hair. We leveled up, like, a lot. How much is a lot? Isamu inquired. Well, you and I were level 1 when we left town, and we're all level 20 now. Izuku replied. Isamu's wings stuttered for a second before catching himself. Excuse my language, but what the F dash, that seems like a drastic leap. What kind of rats did we kill? Meanwhile, back in Axel. What do you mean you accidentally gave wrong information? Came the disbelieving scream from a blonde receptionist, causing heads within the guild hall to turn. That's what I'm trying to explain, Miss Luna. The request form I was filling out wasn't completed. In my exhausted state I didn't finish it, and my son, thinking it was done, posted it for me. A slightly graying-haired man explained to the frantic woman. What information did you leave out? Demanded Luna. Well, the truth is it has to do with the rat infestation. Due to how tired I was, I simply wrote, rats, when I really should have written, plague rats, the farmer explained. Luna felt faint, her legs began to give out. It was only because one of her coworkers caught her that she didn't hit the floor. Plague rats. Are you saying that I sent a level 1 14-year-old to exterminate plague rats? Luna was becoming frantic. She had unknowingly sent a 14-year-old to his death. Of course she had no knowledge about what Isamu could do. She had just assumed he was a special baby dragon. If she had had the knowledge, she would probably be a whole lot calmer. But right now she wanted to strangle the farmer standing before her. She began to look around frantically before her eyes landed on a set of siblings who had just returned from a job themselves, along with their now former party member, an archwizard who refused to use any other type of magic except for explosion. Rise, Lena. Luna called out to the siblings. The two named had just dropped their former teammate at a table and turned their attention to Luna. What can we do for you, Miss Luna? Rise answered. I need you to go to Farmer Orson's farm and rescue a level 1 sorcerer adventurer and his dragon partner. The adventurer is only 14. Please. Luna all but begged. Sure thing, Luna. We'll go save the little newbie. Lena declared, jumping up and down. Another chance to prove the glory of Explo. A girl in a red outfit with a witch's hat began. You're not going. Rise cut her off with an emotionless voice. You're more likely to get us killed. Sorry, Megumin, it's not that you're a bad person or anything, it's just that, well. Lena tried to explain. You're a liability that we cannot afford to deal with. Rise declared, already heading for the guild entrance. Not what I was going for. Lena pointed out with a sheepish smile. The doors burst open at that moment, Kazuma running inside and grabbing a hold of Luna. Please tell me it's a joke, he shouted fearfully. For a second Luna didn't know what he was talking about, before it clicked. I'm sorry, but it is. Rise and his sister Lena, she gestured at the siblings, are going out now to try and rescue him. Kazuma whirled on the two. Please, take me with you, he pleaded to the siblings. Hey guys, there's a red dragon heading for town. Some random guild member shouted as he ran into the guild hall. Don't attack it, Kazuma and Luna both shouted, running outside, shoulders sagging slightly to their relief and utter joy upon seeing the familiar yet slightly larger dragon, with a very familiar mop of green hair sitting upon the creature's back. He was alive. That was all they cared about. The moment Izuku's feet hit the ground after Isamu had landed, he found himself being embraced by a relieved-looking Kazuma and Luna. Okay, did I miss something? He asked while a blush crept up his face. Oh, thank Eris, you're alive, was the only reply he got from Luna, while Kazuma looked him up and down. Dude, you have no idea just how lucky you are to be alive. Kazuma exclaimed, ruffling Izuku's hair, even as the green net tried to escape. What are you talking about? I was fine. Those rats weren't all that hard to beat? He asked with confusion written across his face as he furrowed his brow. I'm sorry Izuku, I am so sorry, Luna began. I can never tell you how sorry I am. Izuku finally managed to escape the limbs entrapping him. Okay, can someone please tell me what is going on? I'm confused, he demanded, crossing his arms. I am too, Isamu joined in. Why did nobody give me a hug? All eyes looked to the still large dragon in bewildered disbelief. I'll give you a hug if you shrink back down. Izuku replied, never taking his eyes off the small gathering before him. I think I can explain, son. Izuku turned towards the voice, recognizing the farmer and his family from earlier that morning, nodding for the man to continue. It took a solid 5 minutes for Farmer Orson to explain. By the end of it, Izuku was pinching the bridge of his nose, letting out a frustrated sigh. So essentially what you're telling me is that I faced a whole horde of monster rats, and that I'm lucky to be alive. Izuku replied wearily, receiving nods from all around. Tilting his head back to look up at the sky, he let out a slight huff of laughter. Guess it's a good thing I had Isamu and Kamaji with me then, huh? He chuckled. Kazuma tilted his head at his green-haired friend along with a few others. Who's Kamaji? And seriously, you named something Kamaji? Kazuma questioned with a look of disbelief. Yup, and by the way, this is Kamaji. Izuku chimed, pointing his thumb to the top of his head where the mentioned Kamaji popped out with a cheer. Emoti! The slime cried out gleefully while turning pink. You have got to be the luckiest BSUD I have ever met, drawled the older teen. That's an emoticon slime. Luna gasped in surprise. They are super rare, and you found one? Both Kazuma and Izuku turned to the woman. What's an emoticon slime? They asked in unison. Izuku quickly shook his head. You know what? Never mind, I think I understand. The changing colors is enough of an explanation. Right now all I want to do is collect my reward, take a bath, eat, and go to bed. Luna and the others looked at him stunned. You mean, you actually completed the quest? Luna asked with a look of surprise on her face. Izuku nodded. Yeah, had to use one of my skills to create a few new spells though. I kinda forgot a sorcerer doesn't cast all of their spells like those of the wizard class do. So I ended up trapping the rats within their nest at some old abandoned mine and then proceeded to burn them all from the inside by creating a plant that produced flammable gas. Had Isamu set the main plant on fire, and well, there's no more rat problem. The group could only stare at the green-haired teen in stunned silence. It was Luna who ended up breaking the silence first. Izuku, can I see your guild card please? She asked in a calm tone. Izuku quickly dug the card out of the sachet he had placed it in, and handed it over to the woman. Luna took a quick glance over the card, and sure enough to her surprise there was a gold star next to the job request that showed he had completed it. She also took note of his new level and that of his friends Isamu and Kamaji. She passed the card back over to the teen, still not entirely believing the teen had accomplished such a difficult job that most adventurers would find difficult. Plague rats were not something a group of 3 would find easy to deal with, but she guessed with a dragon and an emoticon slime that it wouldn't be much of a challenge. Okay, let's get back to the guild. I have to do the numbers again and get you the actual reward for this job. Luna told him. Sure, we might as well eat something while I'm there. Izuku agreed. Wait, before you go I have a request. A voice interjected. Izuku turned and was met with 2 similar-looking people who could only be siblings due to the same colored orange hair and purple eyes. It was the male who spoke as he stepped forward. I am Rise and this is my sister, Lena, and we were wondering if you would like to join our party? Rise proposed. You see, we just had a vacancy and we want to fill the spot up as quickly as possible. The girl, Lena, pointed out. Izuku blinked. This was new, no one had ever wanted him to join a team before. Normally he was left out of group activities. Perhaps being in a new world had more benefits than what he had first thought. It truly was a new beginning for him. Izuku smiled softly and bowed slightly. Isamu, who had shrunk down to be at the same height as Izuku, mimicked him and bowed as well. We would be honored to join your party. Izuku replied happily. Kami squealed in a happy tone, agreeing with Izuku. Emoti! Izuku never even noticed the dark aura or the glare he was receiving from a girl wearing an eye patch. Later that evening, after having receiving the updated reward and having a warm meal while regaling everyone at the guild of the fight with the plague rats and an extra long bath, Izuku and his two friends returned to his room at the inn, where Izuku proceeded to take a look at his guild card. It was while studying the card that Izuku made a very interesting discovery. While he had used up a few skill points for several of the spells he now had in his arsenal, he had gained 60 more skill points for leveling up to level. It was while he was admiring the fact he had gained more skill points that he made the discovery that he could use those skill points on Isamu and Kamaji, and could also add some to his and their HP and MP as well. After thinking about it, it actually made sense that not only would they level up with him, but would also get skill points as well. So not only could he now give skill points to his familiars, he could also create spells specifically tailored for them. Izuku couldn't help the grin that formed across his face. Isamu, who was curled up on a pillow, looked up at Izuku, taking note of the grin. "What's got you so happy, Zuzu?" "Modi," Kamaji chirped, prodding at Izuku's grin with it. "Slime tendril." Izuku ran a hand across the slime's body. "I just found out that I can give you guys skill points, as well as make spells for you guys." Isamu sat up and looked at Izuku in awe. "That would be awesome," he observed in a soft tone. "Emoti, yay!" the blue slime cheered, turning a bright cheerful yellow. "Yeah," Izuku grinned at the slime's happiness. "For once things are starting to look up." Izuku went to bed that night with a smile upon his face. It was dark again. Once again he was floating in the darkness, once more unable to move. And once again he could hear his mother, though instead of crying she sounded angry. And this time everything sounded clearer. "How dare you?" "Inko." Oh, it sounded like his mother just struck someone. That last voice sounded suspiciously like his Auntie Mitsuki. "Auntie, was that Bakugo?" Maybe it was him that his mother slapped. Get out, and don't you ever come near me or my son again, you vile monster." Izuku was sure he was missing some important information, because his mother would never speak to someone like that. "Inko, you don't mean that?" Mitsuki's voice cut through the darkness. "I do. Get that little villain away from me and my son. He adored you, he admired you, and you told my baby to kill himself. You're no hero, Bakugo Katsuki. You're nothing more than a villain, a monster, and my son went out of his way to save you, and look what it's got him. My son deserved better. It should be you on that bed, not my Izuku." Silence followed the sound of the second smack before Mitsuki's horrified voice spoke up. "Inko, I'm so sorry, I don't— oh, please forgive me. Get out now." His mother's voice was cold and harsh. "Inko, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it." Mitsuki sobbed. What the hell had just happened? Did Auntie slap his mother? A familiar glow began to appear behind him, pulling him back to the waking world. The waking world. Izuku slowly opened his eyes. What a strange dream. He thought to himself as he slowly sat up. Looking around, his gaze landed on the two sleeping figures on the extra pillows. He gave a fond smile at the two figures of Isamu and Kamaji. He had only had the two for a day and he already cared for both of them greatly. Sliding out of bed, Izuku tiptoed over to the wash basin to splash some water on his face. Once done with that, he began to quietly do some light exercise to get himself woke up and motivated, trying his best to forget about the dream. It was not something he wanted to think about. In fact, he didn't want to have any more dreams like it ever again. They were cruel in his opinion. Although, to be honest with himself, he would love to see his mom again. After about an hour of his light exercise, Izuku decided it was time to rouse his sleeping companions, which as it turned out was very easy to do. All he had to do was poke Kamaji, who giggled a little before bouncing up and onto Izuku's head. Isamu also turned out to be very ticklish. A few pokes had the little dragon laughing and trying to get away from the fingers. A few minutes later saw the trio making their way down into the inn proper, where Agatha had pushed Izuku down into a nearby chair at a table already set up, and then proceeded to gush at how adorable Isamu and Kamaji were. Thankfully, Izuku had help in eating the massive amount of food. Once the three had eaten their fill and stored the leftovers into Izuku's inventory, the three headed out. "So, Izuku, what's on the agenda today?" Isamu asked, tilting his head up to look up at Izuku from where said teen was holding him. "Well, first we're going to go meet Rise and Lena at the guild to go over a few things, then I'd like to speak to Miss Luna about any houses for sale, or even a piece of land that I could purchase. After that I think we'll sit down and start distributing skill points between the three of us, picking some new spells, and we'll see about possibly doing another job request, one that doesn't involve giant monster rats, maybe something like gathering herbs again, or helping a baker. I concur, sounds like a good plan. The little dragon agreed. The next few hours had their ups and downs. The talk with Rise and Lena was quite fruitful as they merely discussed what Izuku's role would be in the party, what he was capable of and what Isamu and Kamaji could do. Finally they discussed how to go about splitting the rewards up, in which Izuku pulled Luna in and introduced the idea of a banking system, and thus came up with the idea of party coffers or a single coffer for a single person. It was a system that, for a modest sum of money, allowed the adventurers to keep their money and other valuable items within the walls of the guild, making it easy to save money for paying rent, procuring meals, and to afford services that would otherwise make for awkward moments when making monetary transactions. Luna had immediately loved the idea of the system and went to introduce the idea with the guild master. In the end the three came to an agreed-upon percentage from all rewards. After that the two siblings parted ways for the day, promising to meet up the next day to go on a quest together to see how they all work together. With nothing else to do and having to wait on Luna to return, Izuku pulled out his card and set his two little friends on the table, and then began to distribute the needed skills for his familiars. It took some time but he also figured out how to give the two some spells he had created for their own use. After an hour had come and gone, Luna made an appearance to give Izuku the good news. It turned out the guild master had loved the idea, and was beating himself up for not thinking of something similar. And since Izuku had come up with the idea he and his party would get theirs free of charge. Sadly however he discovered that there were no homes for sale, and the only way to purchase land was if he was a noble, which he was not. Though not to be deterred he was already planning on alternative housing, one that would make traveling much easier. And finally before lunch Izuku took another job in gathering some sort of mushroom that supposedly helped in antidote potions. So all in all it wasn't a bad day, at least it wasn't until Aqua came into the guild in a mood. At this point Izuku was just ready to remove the Void Aqua from his list of to-do things. It seemed he just couldn't avoid the blue-haired goddess. At least this time Kazuma seemed to keep her distracted long enough for the